and welcome to Meet the Candidates event for New York Assembly District 114. All candidates on the ballot were invited, and this event was organized by the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. This event will be recorded and posted on our website in its entirety. The video taken tonight is the property of the League and can only be used by the League or licensed media according to FCC regulations. It may not be used by the candidates except to post a link to the complete video. We do not make this request lightly. We have had recent experience where candidates or their supporters have used portions of our video or an audience member's own video against their opponents. Obviously, this can damage our ability to organize these forums if candidates feel the video will be used against them. The League is nonpartisan, and use of the video by a campaign specifically against another candidate goes against our purpose. This behavior would discredit us with candidates, making it difficult for us to sponsor future forums. Posting these videos is a breach of trust and very disrespectful of the League. All candidates participating this evening have pledged that they will abide by this policy. My name is Barbara Thomas. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. I live in Saratoga Springs, and I will be your moderator tonight. The League of Women Voters of Saratoga County is a nonpartisan, volunteer political organization dedicated to the informed and responsible participation of citizens in government. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. That has been the League policy since 1920. Membership is open to anyone who is eligible to register and vote, whether male or female. Please consider joining your local league. We received questions in advance of this forum, and they've been reviewed by League members, and questions have been selected to be representative and to avoid redundancy. And we never use questions of a personal nature. We have 2 timers for this evening's event. Cards will be held up for the candidates to glance at. Green means 1 minute left. Yellow means 30 seconds. And red means time is up. Okay. The candidates for the New York Assembly District 114 in alphabetical order are Claudia Braymer, running on the Democratic and Working Families line. Matthew J. Simpson, running on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence line. And Evelyn Wood, working on the SAM, or Serve America movement. Now it is time to hear their 2-minute opening statements. They have drawn lots to determine the order. And the first to speak is Ms. Wood, Evelyn.
All right. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm very happy to be here and excited that we have this opportunity. As you know, my name is Evelyn Wood, and I am a candidate for Assembly. I'm a lifelong resident of the Adirondack Park. I've always lived in the town of Thurman. For many years, I was the town supervisor in the town of Thurman and served in the Warren County Board of Supervisors. I'm running this year because I feel that the disconnect between the people and everyday residents of the district and our government is greater this year than it ever has been before. And I feel very strongly that we need to have representation that is out there punching a time clock and working just like so many of us in the district are and struggling. I'd like to take my many years of experience, both expanding the internet and improving infrastructure, and put that to use for the people in the district so that we can meet our needs and hopefully assist more of our working families to see success. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. And the next person to speak will be Claudia Braymer. Go ahead, Claudia. Unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you so much to the other candidates, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to debate and to allow the voters to see each of the candidates. I'm Claudia Braymer, and I'm running because I care about our communities, about our children, working families, seniors, our small business owners, entrepreneurs, and the farmers throughout this district. This is a broad district geographically, but we have a lot that brings us together, more than the narrow issues that may divide us. We're independent, hardworking, and we care about each other. I don't think you'll hear a lot of differences in the policies between the candidates tonight. What you, the voters, will need to decide is who will be the stronger voice for the North Country and who will fight the hardest for us. That's me. I grew up in rural blue-collar Pennsylvania, running through the fields and forests near my home. I grew up coming to the Adirondacks in the summers, which is when I first fell in love with this area. My husband and I honeymooned here, and we wanted to move to this area. After law school, I found a job in Glens Falls, and we are now raising our 2 children here and are proud to call this area our home. Elect me to serve as our next assembly person because I have the leadership and advocacy skills to be a great representative and a strong voice for the people and concerns of the North Country. As a mom, small business owner, and county supervisor, I have demonstrated that I care about our communities, about sustainable and affordable living for hardworking families, and about protecting our natural resources that are so important to our economy. On the county board, I am an independent voter. I do my homework, and I make the best decision that I can for residents and taxpayers. The same tenacity that helped me to become a world-class rugby player is what I will use to fight for the North Country. In Albany, I will serve us with independence, integrity, and tenacity. I would be honored to have your vote and to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Matthew Simpson, I need to apologize to you because I already screwed up the order that we were going to talk in, but so we would now like to hear your opening statement.
Well, thank you, the League of Women Voters, for this opportunity, and thank you to the candidates here. I know both of them very well, and it's nice to be here. My name is Matt Simpson. I'm born and raised here in the Adirondacks. I've raised my family here. I had a 30-year drywall business that I established here. I'm very proud of that. I am supervisor for the town of Horicon. I'm in my 7th year. I'm also, this is my 3rd year being president of the Adirondack Association of Towns and Villages, representing all of the 101 towns and villages in the Adirondack Park. I am running because I'm seeking the opportunity to be your advocate in the New York State Assembly for the 114th district, because I'm deeply concerned about the future prospects of my neighbors, their families, and the prospect of a prosperous future close to home for their children. I am concerned about the challenges on household budgets due to the high cost of living in New York. I am concerned about job prospects for our youth in the 21st century, where we lack universal access to 20th century broadband and cell coverage. I worry about our senior citizens and their ability to retire here and have access to modern healthcare and emergency services. I am running because we seem to have lost our moral compass, breaking each other down instead of building each other up. I want to bring back common sense and sound financial practices to governing. I am running to uphold and support the values and traditions that have made this country the envy of the world. I am running because I have made a difference in my town, and I know I can make a difference for the people of the 114th district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are now, it's time for the questions, and the candidates will have up to 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions. They are not required to respond, and they can pass if they wish. Candidates have 2 red cards, and that will provide them with an additional 1 minute to add to their response or to respond to something that another candidate said. The timer and I will keep track of the number of red cards used. And we will direct the questions to the candidates in rotation so that everyone gets a chance to respond first. And we are going to go with Matt first. So the first question is, with the pandemic, access to high-speed internet is more critical than ever. What plans do you have to help the areas in New York that lack it?
It is absolutely one of the number one issues that we are facing in the rural towns in upstate New York. Through the pandemic, we had teachers, we had nurses, we had people that would come to our town hall to access our Wi-Fi, just be able to continue life as normal, which is very abnormal sitting in a parking lot trying to continue with connection. The first thing that we need to do is repeal the DOT right-of-way tax on fiber optics. There's also fees on the overhead lines. We also need to look at the transaction, the planning of these lines where they have to negotiate attachment fees to poles. We need make-ready poles and a standard that is required of any pole placement within the Adirondack Park in these rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the next person will be Claudia Braymer. Do you need the question repeated?
Okay, thank you. It has to do with broadband and how important it is. And I agree with Mr. Simpson that absolutely we are having a tough time in the North Country with kids who do not have broadband access. Our teachers are trying to teach remotely, and our medical providers are trying to provide telemedicine, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, without that broadband accessibility and affordability. At the county, during the very beginning of the pandemic, I started working with our DPW superintendent to expand Wi-Fi in our county facilities so that people could come to the parking lots, and providing a database, working with our county planners, of other places where people could go to get Wi-Fi. And I know that those were Band-Aids, but it shows that I'm willing to work hard and get to solutions as quickly as possible. I agree with Mr. Simpson, we have to get rid of the DOT fee that applies to the service providers when they are trying to lay new line along state highways. It is contrary to the governor's plan of trying to move us forward with expanding broadband. And the pole fees are something else that's a problem. In addition, we have a problem with the census block being a determinative factor in where our broadband is being expanded. So you might be on one side of the street and have broadband, and someone else is on a different side of the street and doesn't have broadband. It doesn't have anything to do with practical on the ground situations, and we need to change that. And I will work with the broadband program office to fix that.
Thank you. Okay, Evelyn Wood, if you want to respond to that same question.
Yes, internet's near and dear to my heart. When I was in office in the town of Thurman, we're a rural town as well, I actually did expand internet to reach unserved areas in my town. So I know just how hard it is to actually gain access in these rural areas, particularly within the Adirondack Park where we have additional restrictions. Certainly the 2019 tax should be repealed, but it's also important to take a very hard look at how we are funding the grants that go out and who we are funding. And we should be evaluating as to whether or not they are properly reaching the unserved areas first. I would note that last year, the Monday before Thanksgiving, at the Warren County Board of Supervisors Committee meeting, it was presented that internet was essentially solved for the North Country. And as this year proves, it could never, ever be as solved and up to date as we need it for a pandemic like we are experiencing this year. So there are a number of things we can do, but I look forward to using my experience in actually building out internet to make sure that we implement the proper plans when we award broadband grants to actually reach people as opposed to continually improving areas that are already served.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question, which will go first to Claudia Braymer, is the healthcare crisis brought on by the pandemic, including people losing their jobs which provide health insurance, makes a real problem. What is your plan to address public health in New York State?
That is a serious problem. Making sure that our residents, especially our seniors, are able to access healthcare. Are you guys still with me? Talking about broadband, it looks like you're chopping up. So one of the things that I want to make sure is that during this time of budget crisis, that we are not cutting our funding to Medicare. That is not an area where I want to see us finding savings in our state budget. So I will be working to protect that area. And I think that my opponent, Mr. Simpson, wants to see cuts there, which I do not think is the right time, especially during a pandemic, to do that. There's also a proposal out there, the New York Health Act, which would basically be a single payer system. And I think it's something that we need to start taking a look at, although I know that our state comptroller, who I respect very much, has said that the state would have a very difficult time paying for that. So I think that there is some area for improvement, but we also need to be careful about how we're spending for paying for changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Evelyn Wood, do you want to answer that one? And the question again was the healthcare crisis brought on by the pandemic, including people losing their jobs, which provides their health insurance, is a problem. What is your plan to address public health in New York State?
Well, first of all, usually if you're employed, your insurance is not Medicaid or Medicare. You're usually having insurance either through a self-funded plan or one of the commercial plans. I think one of the best ways to address this during the pandemic, where people are losing their jobs and losing their insurance, are to assist with the cost of the COBRA benefits so that they can hang on to their insurance longer and hopefully until they can find new employment with new healthcare insurance, however that employer offers them. One of the other things that we could also look at is expanding some of the already available state programs and state healthcare options, Child Family Health Plus and other options, perhaps lowering the restrictions and allowing more people to access those programs as they stand currently to assist during this pandemic.
Okay, thank you. And Matthew Simpson, do you want to respond to that? You need the question again.
No, I'm all set. Thank you. So I know what it's like to lose your health insurance and be thrust into that uncertainty, especially as a parent of two young children. We had to make a decision that caused us to lose health insurance. I went out, I was self-employed, I had to look for options. I think it's very important that we look at this issue because, one of our primary responsibilities as a representative of our constituents is to provide for the health and safety of our residents and our constituents. So we need to look at prioritizing our spending in Albany and focus on these things that are our primary responsibilities and stop the needless spending in areas that we shouldn't be spending. It's a very important program.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and the next question is going to go to Evelyn Wood as the first, and it is, in New York State, every child is entitled to a sound basic education, but many of our schools are underfunded. Poorer communities are especially affected, and the COVID pandemic has only made the situation worse. What measures will you support to provide equal educational opportunities for all children?
Well, you are correct. COVID has particularly impacted the already worsening situation and made it so much more difficult for our children to obtain quality educations. As far as funding for the school districts go, I'd like to see the formula for funding reevaluated. It currently is not the most efficient model, and it results in some schools that truly need funding not getting the funding that they truly need, whereas other schools are getting more than sufficient funding to encourage their districts to make larger offerings to children and their families. So I'd like to see the funding model for our school districts reworked to truly help those districts that are most in need. And hopefully that will also assist with the problems we're having right now with the being home some of the time and at school some of the time, and the remote learning as well. Thank you.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Matthew Simpson, do you want to answer that same question?
Sure, thank you. Education is one of our most important things that we need to invest in and protect that funding. And that state aid formula is not equitable for those rural towns, especially ones that are not, that are at a disadvantage because of either their property values or population. It does not represent the need. So we do need to look at that state aid formula, fix it, rearrange it so that those communities that need that extra funding are getting it. There are other communities that are receiving much more than their fair share. There's wealthier school communities, and it's not fair to those rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Claudia Braymer for the same question.
Sure, thank you. I'm sure it will come as no surprise since I'm mom of 2 young kids in school right now. I obviously want to support our rural public schools, and I do not think we should be cutting funding right now. And I agree with the other 2 candidates. The state formula needs to be fixed. And frankly, the state was sued a few years back. It's the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. And that lawsuit decided that the state did need to fix the formula. And the state has still not followed through with providing the money in the fair way that it was supposed to under that lawsuit. I also think we need to do a little bit better of connecting our farms, our local farms, with our school programs. We're already doing that, but I think there's areas there where we could expand. And this isn't exactly on education, but I also think it's important for our children and making sure that they are well supported. And that goes to the affordable housing for their working parents. That's something that I've been pushing for and talking about all through this campaign, is that we need to help our working families be able to get in safe, stable housing that they can afford. And they're working full time, they should be able to have somewhere that they can live. So there are some options I've been talking about through the campaign. I won't get into all the details, but one of them is working with our not-for-profits, like Habitat for Humanity. It may be only one home at a time, but for that family, it's really important, and it could be for generations. Childcare too. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is going to go to Matt Simpson. And the question is, police use of excessive force and the unequal enforcement of the law are concerns of many citizens, not just Black and brown people. What reforms do you support to make everyone safer and the system more just?
The tragedies that we've seen across the country are absolutely inexcusable. They are wrong, and we need to find a solution, provide better training, provide resources to all of these police agencies throughout New York State so that they can look back and figure out what they can improve in their policies. One incident with one officer is not reflective of all of the rest of the good officers that are there protecting our communities. But we really do need to look back at all of our agencies, see what we can learn, what we can improve in our training, provide those resources so that we can do a better job protecting the public safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next responder is going to be Claudia Braymer. You want me to repeat the question?
I think I've got it. Thank you. And I want to say that I am a strong supporter of our law enforcement. Like Mr. Simpson said, there's always room for improvement in any organization. We have great local law enforcement who need to be supported and not dismantled. I want to put out there that I am against defunding the police as it's thought of now. I have been endorsed by the Police Benevolent Association of New York State, and I'm happy to have their support, and I certainly support them and agree that we need to be supporting our law enforcement with training and resources. And in fact, I spoke out against defunding the Glens Falls Police Department and actually lost an endorsement that I had from an organization because of my stance on not defunding the police. And I'm disappointed to have lost that, but it shows that I hold true to my values, and I'm going to continue supporting our law enforcement through the police reforms that are coming down, where they will have to look through their policies and make sure that they have correct practices in place, make sure they have implicit bias training in place, and make sure that they are collecting the data that they need to make sure that they are not discriminating against our residents who are people of color. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Evelyn Wood.
All right, so this has been a very tumultuous year. Unfortunately, I think a lot of things have come to a head this year that have been working that way for a while. When I was chair of public safety, working with the sheriff's office and the jail, that was something that we had discussed, our policies, our procedures, how can we better interact with the community? And one of the solutions to better driving the policy changes I think that we need to have is to start having community forums where the community can come together and express what they think the challenges are and what suggestions they have for how to bring about policy change. Maybe we can't take them all, but I think that one of the problems we're seeing is that people are feeling as though their concerns are not being heard and not being addressed. And one of the best ways to hopefully bring both the police and the community back together is to start having some forums where the public can come in and talk about their concerns. Maybe get to know some of the officers better, just foster more of a community outreach. But I do not support defunding the police, and I strongly support both our police and our corrections officers. They do a tremendous job. They have very dangerous jobs, and they work very hard to protect us all. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty. The next question is on pretty much the same topic. How would you evaluate the bail and discovery reforms that were passed in 2019? Do you think they need tweaking? And the first person to respond to that would be Claudia. Unmute, yeah.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
No, we can't.
I can hear.
Okay.
Oh,
You can hear me?
Yes,
now
yes.
we can.
Okay, I think it's unfrozen now. Just give me 1 second. Hopefully it'll fix itself. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think that the 2019 bail reform was important so that we do not have two systems of justice, one for people who are poor and one for people who are wealthy. So I was happy to see that passed. I did think that changes needed to be made, and I advocated along with my Republican colleagues for changes in 2019. And fortunately, those changes were made in the 2020 legislative session. I think that obviously I want to support our communities and make sure that we are all safe. And if there are additional changes that need to be made, I will be open to that. I think that we need to see it being worked out a little bit more. I think that the most serious charges have already been covered by the bail reform changes that were made in 2020. So I am open to additional changes, but I think it's okay the way it is right now.
Thank you very much. The next person to respond will be Evelyn Wood.
So I am not in favor of the bail reform that took place last year. It was poorly put together, poorly enacted, largely caught the public by surprise. I don't feel that there were two systems of justice. I do think that we could stand to see some change. However, as it was enacted, it put a terrible burden not only on law enforcement and our DAs, but on our community, and it put fear into our communities. Just the thought of, and unfortunately, we've seen a lot of news coverage of how the bail reform law has performed poorly in our communities. I'm in favor of complete repeal and total reworking of it, and then trying to implement in parts of it, parts of change. But as it is right now, I prefer to see the entire thing repealed, scrapped, and start over, because it was a complete failure.
All righty, and Matthew Simpson, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you. Bail reform should be totally repealed. What created the information that was behind this bail reform was an incident down in New York City where somebody was horribly forgotten about in incarceration for a minor offense. That was wrong, and that should not have happened. But the overreaction by the majority in Albany being passed without proper vetting and people taking the time to actually keep focused on the issue at hand, they created a bigger issue. I've spoken to numerous New York State troopers. I'm endorsed by the New York State Troopers PBA. This is a bad law. We had an unfortunate accident at exit 25 on the Northway here, where a good friend of mine was killed by a person that was fleeing the state police. He was on drugs. He continued to leave. There was a threat that he was going to be released on bail and out on the street. Now, he killed somebody. It is wrong that could even be an issue. He should have not had an opportunity to be released. Fortunately, our DA did find a heavier charge and was able to incarcerate him and keep him in jail. But the current bail reform law is still releasing dangerous people into our communities. And it was an overreaction by the majority in Albany. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, and the next question, we're going to start with Evelyn Wood. And the question is that last year, the New York State Legislature passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Its ambitious goal is to reach 100% clean energy by 2040. Do you support that goal? And what roadblocks stand in the way of reaching it?
Well, certainly I value our environment, and of course, living in the Edinburgh Park, we have a beautiful, wonderful place to live and recreate, and I'd like to see that preserved forever, of course. I don't support it. I don't think it's practical, and I don't think that we have the means to actually implement it. It will have devastating effect on our small businesses, our homes, our communities. Quite frankly, most of them, particularly after this year, can't afford to start doing the changes that would need to take place in order to even achieve that goal. So while yes, I do support being friendly to our environment and doing what we can to help with climate change, I can't say that I support that bill. It's going to have too many negative impacts on our communities.
And Matt Simpson, do you want to reply?
I'm very concerned about our environment. Living in the Adirondack Park is really, truly a privilege. And we need to take whatever measures are reasonable measures that we can to prevent any degradation of our natural resources. I've been endorsed by the New York League of Conservation Voters, and because of my background with my environmental issues, stances, I have 2 solar projects that I, along with the town board, have implemented in the town of Horicon. We've made changes throughout our town dealing with the effects of climate change. And we're continually looking for ways that we can reduce our reliance on energy that's being produced by, coal factories or any other sources. We're always looking for options to use renewable sources. I'm not so sure that we can meet these goals. I think that we need to do what we can to try to attain those. So I'm always going to side with the environment. I think it's so important for us to make these changes. If not now, when are we going to address these issues? I'm not so sure that we can meet those goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Claudia?
Yes, thank you very much. Absolutely, I support this goal. Climate change is one of the most pressing issues to the Adirondacks. This is so critical for the natural resources that we have in the Adirondacks, which are economy on tourism to the area. People are coming here all the time. I don't know if you guys can hear me now.
We can hear you, but your video keeps freezing. Just keep going.
Okay, maybe I'll shut off my video for a second, okay? Thank you. I do support the climate change goals. It's one of the most pressing issues to the Adirondacks. And I think that some of the barriers are going to be getting our energy sector transferred over to clean energy. Upstate already has a lot of energy from hydro plants, but being able to meet downstate's energy needs is going to be very difficult. Also, the transportation sector is one of the biggest problems related to climate, and I would like to see us electrify as much of our transportation system as we can. That means putting in electrical charging stations and incentives for people to buy EV cars. I have been endorsed by the Sierra Club as well as the New York League of Conservation Voters. And at the county, I'm the chair of the Environmental Concerns Committee, and I've brought forward many initiatives related to climate change. And Mr. Simpson says that he cares about the environment, but he often does not support those initiatives I'm bringing forward.
All righty, thank you. And the next question will go first to Matthew Simpson. And this is that more than 1 million New Yorkers are out of work. Local governments are grappling with reduced sales tax revenues and pandemic-related costs. New York State next year faces a $17 billion budget gap. What actions could we take to close the gaps?
Well, we started out with a $6 billion deficit before COVID. And that shows you that New York State has a spending problem. We should never have been in a $6 billion deficit situation. And now it's exacerbated by the shortfall of sales tax and revenues coming into the state. The town, I've just adopted my budget in the town of Horicon, and I've reduced spending by $340,000 on a little over $3 million budget. We need to look at all of our spending in Albany, look at the REDCs, economic councils, look at the monies that we've been granting and invest that in the infrastructure to support small business, which that's the backbone of our economy. We need to grow our small business and to survive this. It cannot be put onto the property taxpayers in the state of New York. It's no longer, this is why we have the max exodus of people leaving New York State and businesses closing because of the property taxes, the lack of investment in infrastructure, providing for the things that we are primarily responsible for as representatives of our taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Claudia Braymer, you're next to answer that question.
Great, thank you. I completely agree with Mr. Simpson that we should not increase our real property taxes. And so I want to point out that Mr. Simpson county tax increase every year. I have opposed increased spending at the county level. In 2018 specifically, I opposed the county budget due to excesses, and he voted in favor. I brought forward supported 3 amendments to reduce spending in that year's budget, and he opposed each of those reductions in the amended form. So I think that we do need to find ways to save money. I would like Mr. Simpson to actually follow through with some of those at the county board, and I'm questioning whether he would do that at the state level. It would be great to have some federal funding to help us And we do need to cut spending on programs like he mentioned, the REDC, but that's only $750 million out of a $17 billion gap. I do think that we need to make sure billionaires are paying their fair share and close loopholes where they aren't. And that includes removing the stock transfer rebate for some purchases of stock, and also a tax on luxury second homes in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you. And Evelyn Wood, would you like to respond to that?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. More than 1 million New Yorkers are out of work. Local governments are grappling with reduced sales tax revenues and pandemic-related costs. New York State next year faces a $17 billion budget gap. What actions could we take to close the gaps?
All right, I wanted to make sure we were actually talking about the state budget and not the county budget. As far as the state budget goes, several years ago when I was in office, the state budget director came to Queensbury and presented the state budget. And I was the only person in that room who stood up and told them they were playing with a shell game with the money then. And it was going to come back to bite us down the road. And here we are today. New York does have a spending problem. And the problem we're going to have going forward is if we receive federal bailout money, they're never going to take a hard look at how they're spending the money. I know that people don't like to hear about cuts, but the bottom line is the taxpayers cannot afford this, and our budget gap has done nothing but grow because the state has not taken fiscal responsibility for their actions, and the people who are on the hook for this are the citizens. What we need to do is go in and cut anything that is not an essential service, and I know that nobody likes to hear that, but the taxpayers cannot afford to continue to pay these taxes. The state has done a terrible, terrible job. They're really great politicians. They're absolutely abhorrent at doing budgets. They need to get rid of anything that is non-essential until the state can get back on its feet financially. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question will go first to Claudia. And it is, should New York State allow physicians to provide medical aid in dying to terminally ill patients who request that type of health care? Why or why not?
That's a very difficult question. It's something that I think is really personal to people. And I think it's a question that it should be a choice that's left between the patient and their physician. I think we could have some state guidance around how that is implemented. But I do think it's something that people should have the option in order to be in control of their last days.
All righty, thank you. And the next person to respond, Evelyn Wood.
I agree with Claudia. I believe that that is a decision that should be made between the patient and their doctor. Each individual is just that, an individual. A government tends to paint with a broad brush and not be able to look at individuals and individual needs. So I believe that the patients should have that right if that is what they choose. I'm not in favor of human suffering. There is nothing good about allowing anyone to suffer, particularly if they would choose not to. Provided the choice is theirs, that should be left between them and their doctor. And the state should not be getting involved any more than strictly necessary just to regulate the practice.
Thank you very much. And Matthew Simpson, what's your response?
And this is a really important issue. I've through my life been in those situations where, we had family members that were passing, and I've been there. And I too think that this is something that should be between, that person and their doctor. I think there needs to be certain aspects of that looked at. It's got to be really defined as to what circumstances somebody could make that choice. There's also, concern for whether somebody truly wants to end their life because of pain and suffering, or maybe it's a suicide situation. I would want clarity on on what those circumstances are that somebody would be able to make that choice.
Thank you very much. All right, the next question is going to go first to Evelyn Wood. And it is that New York State recently enacted many election law reforms designed to make it easier for all citizens to exercise their right to vote. But same-day registration and no excuse absentee balloting must be passed again by the legislature. Would you support these proposals, and are there other election reforms that you support?
There are a number of election reforms that I support. As many of you know, I'm running as a third party this year, and we do have a lawsuit going against the state right now because the state was told that their reforms with regard to the elimination of third parties was not legal, and then the governor slipped them right into the budget, so they're going to take effect anyway. I'm strongly opposed to that. It is deeply unfortunate that the state feels the need to limit people's right to run for office, but encourage at the same time more and more people to do the same-day registration. I'm in favor of everybody voting. It is one of our greatest rights, and we should all be exercising it. I am not as opposed to same-day registration as long as there is photo identification and we can verify where they're coming from. As far as absentee ballots with no excuse, I know dozens of people who have requested absentee ballots every year saying they can't make it to the polls. They just don't want to go to the polls. So as far as I'm concerned, that's already essentially in effect. It may not be official, but that already exists, and I have no problem with that. As long as people are voting, that's the most important thing. But there are a large number of election reforms that need to take place in the state of New York. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Matthew Simpson?
Could you read that question again the way?
Sure. New York State recently enacted many election law reforms designed to make it easier for all citizens to exercise their right to vote. But same-day voter registration and no excuse absentee balloting have to be passed again by the legislature because those are constitutional amendment issues. Would you support these proposals, and are there other election reforms that you support?
I think that we need to do everything we can to promote the ability for someone to be able to make that vote. That's an important right that each and every one of us have. And it's one of the most sacred things that we need to protect. I think that as far as the absentee ballots, I think if somebody requests an absentee ballot, they should have that. I think someone should also have the option to come in and vote if they choose to vote. I would not want to do one or the other. I want to maintain that. As far as same-day registration, I believe that if I would prefer it to be a little more time prior to the election, but if somebody does provide proper identification, they should be allowed to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And Claudia Braymer?
Thanks. I'll try it with my video on this time. I agree with the other candidates. This is an important civic duty, and we should make it as available to people as we can. I do agree with the no absentee ballots being available to people who request them. And I also think that it's perfectly fine to have same-day voter registration. I would like to see us also lower back down the limits to allowing additional parties to be on the ballot, like Ms. Wood. She's on a third party, and it's great for our democracy to have all of these candidates. And I think we should make it a little bit less restrictive, the time frame within which you can change your party status. So I think that might be another change we can make it easier for our voters. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. Okay, this may be the very last question that we have tonight. And it will go first to Matthew Simpson. Our schools, police, and hospital emergency rooms bear the brunt of the problems resulting from mental illness, but teachers, law enforcement officers, and first responders often say they are not trained or equipped for this task. How do you propose handling these issues?
This is a very important issue. I've dealt with mental issue with close friends of mine, and we need to we need to provide those resources and that training to people that to the police officers. We need a level of training to those police officers, emergency room people, but we need to bolster those programs that we have already within our communities and, shore those up so that we can meet the need and provide that service to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And Claudia? See if you can do it.
Thank you. Yes, our ability, our ability to provide mental health services to our residents is lacking. We have a lack of mental health providers in our country, and part of it is the availability of funding and the amount that they can receive from their insurance, from the insurance companies that they take money from. So I'd like to see us work forward through a way to make that funding available more easily to our North Country mental health providers. I also think that we do need to provide more resources to our law enforcement, and there are some law enforcement agencies who are starting to turn in that direction, where they will be hiring people with mental health backgrounds to go out on call rather than just an officer. We need to leverage the state resources, the Office of Mental Health, as much as we can for the North Country residents.
Thank you. And Evelyn, would you like to respond?
I would, but could you repeat the question for me first?
Sure. Our schools, police, and hospital emergency rooms bear the brunt of the problems resulting from mental illness, but teachers, law enforcement officers, and first responders often say they are not trained or equipped for that task. How do you propose handling these issues?
Well, I think that is correct. They often do not have the training that they need. One of the things that we need to do is get that more involved in all of those areas. However, I am hesitant, particularly with first responders, who those of us in the North Country know many of our communities are seeing waning numbers of both fire and EMS staff, and the training requirements are very high. So I would not be in favor of seeing it as a mandatory training requirement, but I do think that we should make the training available to them, and hopefully it would encourage more people to take up on them and help them better be prepared for what they're encountering when they do their jobs. It is unfortunate there seems to be a stigma regarding mental health and getting those mental health services that so many people need, particularly this year. We're seeing a large increase in it, but I would think that we need to make training available to all of our people so that they can be better prepared to assist. But I would not want it to be a mandatory training just simply because they've already got too many requirements and regulations weighing on them already.
All right, it looks like we have time for one more question before we move to the closing statements. So the last question now is, and it will go first to Claudia Braymer. As parents go back to work, they are finding that childcare is either not readily available or, for many, unaffordable. The inability to find affordable, high-quality childcare not only affects parents' ability to work, but also negatively impacts their employer when their employees are either absent from work or distracted on their job. If elected, what actions would you take to address the crisis in childcare? And the first question is to Claudia.
That is a really big problem. We're seeing that a lot with our small businesses here. Can you guys hear me? we're seeing that problem with our small businesses, that people are not able to return to work because they have their kids at home with them, either because childcare is not open, or they're, concerned about sending their children to childcare right now. Stores out there, those who want to start childcare businesses, with some of the opening fees, the licensure fees that they have to pay for the state, lowering those fees. The other thing is giving them the resources that they need to meet all of the requirements that are necessary to open a daycare or a childcare center. That's pretty burdensome on those entities, and we need to give them the support that they need in order to be able to open successfully
All right,
and stay open. Thank you.
Evelyn Wood.
Well, this is a problem that's facing not just the small businesses, but even my employer, which is a fairly large employer. We are struggling with this as well. There are many of us, like myself. I have 2 children who are in school. We're trying to work full time. My husband's working full time. I work full time. We have both of the girls trying to go to school and be home, and how to cover that. I have heard at EDC meetings, about the importance of addressing it by opening more childcare. I'm going to go the other direction on this. Actually, I feel very strongly that if at all possible, the children should be with their family. If not their parents, then perhaps an aunt, an uncle, grandparents are wonderful assets to children. I think that we need to explore ways not to just stick kids in daycare, because often daycare is so expensive that you're kind of wondering why you're working, because you're spending all your money that you earn on daycare. We need to work at finding a way to assist with keeping the kids with family members whenever possible. It's so much better for the children to grow up in a family environment, provided it's appropriate. Of course, I know there's not, everybody has wonderful family environments, but many kids and parents have family members that could possibly help with the child care. And we need to look at maybe a way of either subsidizing it or offering a funding allotment for relatives that want to help take care of their kids, whether they be grandkids or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. And Matthew Simpson.
When my kids were young, we had this same issue. My wife and I worked multiple jobs to try to make ends meet. I was building a business, so I was not able to be home all the time, and it was very stressful. It was tough for my wife with her career and mine also. I think that, with childcare facilities, I've talked to owners that the regulatory burdens on them, it adds so much cost, and it's cost prohibitive for a young family that has to use that as an option. And I do agree with Ms. Wood that preferably it would be better to have a parent or a grandparent, but for that to happen, we've got to provide good, meaningful jobs so that young families are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. And that's the way it is in the majority of this district. We need stability and good paying jobs. And we also need to deal on the regulatory side with New York State regulating businesses such as, or offerings such as childcare out of as not an option for young families.
All righty.
I would like to use my red card. Can I use my red card?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I just want to respond quickly to what Mr. Simpson said. We do need to ensure that small businesses have the resources and assistance they need to meet regulatory requirements. I don't always agree with downstate politicians, and I think that we need to ensure stronger review of new regulations' impact on small businesses before those regulations are passed. And I think we need to eliminate overly restrictive regulations. And I'll give you 2 examples: employee scheduling and reporting administrative requirements on small businesses, and state administrative licensing burdens on small businesses like restaurants and minority women-owned businesses. Mr. talks about regulatory reform, and it takes time, his predecessor, our predecessor, was not able to make much progress there. And I don't think that Mr. Simpson has a plan to tackle reducing the regulatory burdens on our small businesses.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with their red card? Otherwise,
I want a red card, please.
okay,
So one of the biggest challenges I face as a small business owner, when I started that, I invested everything I had on behalf of my family. All of my family's resources were invested in my business. Little did I know that after 30 years that I had a silent partner that I didn't anticipate, and that was New York State. We have we have unrealistic workers' compensation costs. That whole program needs to be looked at. There's fraud, there's waste, there's regulatory issues with that. As a business owner, I know what those costs were because I wrote those checks every week. I provided jobs for many employees over 31 years. So I do know, and I have a plan, but the majority in Albany has prevented it and made it difficult for businesses to survive in this district. And that needs to change. And that will change with me. Thank you.
Evelyn, you want to use one too?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So now we are going to go to the closing statement. And the first closing statement will go to Claudia Braymer.
Thank you. This has been great. Thank you so much. My record on the Warren County Board of Supervisors demonstrates that I serve the residents and taxpayers with independence, integrity, and tenacity. I will do the same in Albany. My opponent's record on the county board demonstrates that he is a follower and not a leader. If you want a leader who will fight for us, then I'm your candidate. I appreciate and respect the responsibility that I will have as a representative for all of us, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Green, working families, conservatives, and yes, Sam party members. I am proud of the broad coalition of support that I have gained from a diverse range of people and organizations, from the Police Benevolent Association to women's, social, and environmental groups. Join with us and vote for me on November 3rd for Assembly. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And the next person to speak will be Evelyn Wood.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here tonight. It was an interesting exchange. I just want to take this time to remind the people watching this that I am running to represent you. I am not running to further go tit for tat, Republican versus Democrat, which, you know, watch the video tonight. Check out who answered the questions. I want to represent us in Albany. I punch a time clock like you do. I'm raising children just like you. I live in the blue line. I understand what that entails. You know, we have a farm. I have a small business, farmers markets, etc. But the bottom line is you need a representative who does something, doesn't just talk about it. And I am the only person in this race who has expanded internet, worked with the federal government to improve our roads and bridges. And I'm also the only one who has stood up to the state budget director and told them that they were not spending their money correctly. I would appreciate your vote on November 3rd. We've been doing the same thing over and over again. Let's do something different.
Thank you very much. And Matthew Simpson.
I want to first start out by saying thank you to everyone here and also my opponents for this opportunity. Democracy should be an echo chamber of various ideas and viewpoints. Our government in Albany is currently dominated by a single party agenda. We need to bring balance to the legislative conversation, and that means a true voice of the North Country. As a 30-year business owner, president of the Adirondack Association of Towns and Villages, a lifelong resident and taxpayer, I know what those issues are. We need 21st century infrastructure for a 21st century economy. New sewer, clean water, broadband, cell, protect our environment for future generations, relax regulations, and reduce taxes to unleash our economic potential. I've done this. As a town supervisor, I played an integral role in passage of the Health and Safety Land Bank. that was voted on by all of the voters within New York State in 2017. I worked with all levels in government and environmental groups to allow. Okay, thank you. I see the stop.
Okay, yeah, you see the stop sign. I want to
Can I
thank.
use my red card to finish that? I still
No,
had one more.
no, you know the rules.
I have one more sentence. I'm sorry.
I should have spoken quicker. Anyhow, I do want to thank all of the candidates. It was very refreshing to have 3 candidates who respected each other, who spoke to the issues, and who are very, very nice people to know, I think. So I wanted to also go ahead and say that we want to ask the audience at home to remember to vote, that the general election is November 3rd, but early voting starts on October 24th through the Sunday before Election Day, which is November 1st. And you can look up your early voting and Election Day sites. Well, in Warren and Washington County, those are at the County Board of Elections. Saratoga County does have 3 sites. The closest one to your district, I believe, is the one at the Gavin Park in Wilton. So people at home can request an absentee ballot checking temporary illness on their application, but it has to be requested and into the Board of Elections by October 27th, so you have to act quickly. And when you receive your absentee ballot, you can remember to sign the envelope, but not the ballot, and mail it to the Board of Elections according to the instructions. You can also request an absentee ballot online at absenteeballot.election.ny.gov. And then you can vote on Election Day from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And the Board of Elections is taking all kinds of precautions to help make that as safe an experience as is possible these days. I want to thank you in the audience and all of the candidates for attending this event and helping to educate the voters. And I also want to invite people to see the candidates' responses on Vote 411, where the league keeps a voter guide. Okay, thank you and good night.